comply with the requirements of the Administrative Procedures Act and will be posted on Commerce's Clean Buildings webpage after this hearing concludes. Statement of inquiry for the proposed rules being considered today was filed as WSR 22-23-136, and the proposed rules were filed as WSR 23-24-104. On March 25th, 2022, Governor Jay Inslee signed into law Senate Bill 5722. This law requires the state to expand the state's existing clean buildings law by adopting energy and operations management programs and benchmarking requirements for a new category of buildings called Tier 2 buildings. These Tier 2 buildings include buildings between 20,000 and 50,000 square feet and all multifamily buildings over 20,000 square feet. It also requires Commerce to establish compliance-related procedures, an early adopter incentive program, and a variety of customer-facing resources to aid with meeting energy and operations management program and benchmarking requirements. Commerce must update its administrative rules in WAC 194-50 to incorporate these changes and establish reporting requirements for Tier 2 buildings. While the original Clean Buildings Act, House Bill 1257, passed in 2019, includes energy performance requirements for Tier 1 buildings, including commercial buildings greater than 50,000 square feet, the expansion bill does not require a performance standard for Tier 2 buildings at this time. As required by Senate Bill 5722, the Energy Division has developed a schedule to complete rulemaking by the end of 2023. The initial notice of rulemaking, or CR 101, was filed in November of 2022, so that the Energy Division could spend the majority of 2023 conducting public workshops and collecting stakeholder input on Tier 2 requirements. Commerce held public workshops throughout 2023 to inform Tier 2 buildings requirements. Recordings and materials from these workshops are posted to our website at commerce.wa.gov/buildings. So if anyone wishes to testify today, please put your name and affiliation in the chat box. For those who have called in and are unable to use the chat box, please unmute yourselves now by using *6 and let us know your name and affiliation. Okay. We are also accepting written comments. The deadline for written comments on the proposed rules is 5 p.m. today, Tuesday, November 21st, 2023. Comments can be submitted through our online comment form, which Liz will put a link in the chat, or submitted directly to buildings@commerce.wa.gov. The hearing will continue until everyone who has asked to comment has had an opportunity to testify. We have 2 hours set aside for the public hearing. If it appears we have many testifiers, we may impose an appropriate time limit for individuals wishing to speak. Please be sure to state your name and affiliation when you testify. Do we have any questions about process before we start? All right, Liz, can you tell us who's up first to testify?
Sure. We'd like to invite Karen Musiker to unmute and testify.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Karen Musiker. I am the Executive Director of District Support Services for the Mukilteo School District. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the Department of Health issued extensive guidance to schools with measures to implement in order to ensure the healthiest environment possible for our staff and students. Those protocols included standards for heating and ventilation systems, and at the time recommended 100% outside air be brought in to our heating and ventilation systems. Since then, we've all learned a great deal about the importance of outside air in creating the healthiest environment for our staff and students and preventing the transmission of viruses. In fact, existing guidance still emphasizes the importance of maximized outside air and recommends 5 to 6 air exchanges per hour. These recommendations and our efforts to meet the expectations for ensuring the health and safety of those in our schools conflict with clean building performance standards. Operating HVAC systems, particularly older systems that many schools have, to the health recommended standards requires using more energy, not less, and therefore significantly impacts our ability to meet the required energy use intensity targets for compliance. It also creates confusion over which protocols to prioritize when programming and balancing systems. Completely replacing HVAC systems district-wide is financially entirely out of reach, given the cost of those systems and our dependence on our local voters to approve school ballot measures for that funding. Further, the work of Commerce should align with other legislative districts. In the current biennium budget, the legislature allocated $500,000 to Commerce to work on the Clean Energy Fund program. Two of the key components were to analyze the financial investments required for owners of Tier 1 covered buildings and to make recommendations to the legislature to assist building owners in attaining compliance, including strategies for increasing energy efficiency and cost-benefit analysis of options. We urge Commerce to consider how the timeline for WAC adoption, including the proposed rules, could be better aligned with the direction from the legislature in its budget proviso. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Next up, we have Andrew Rawls. I invite you to unmute and testify.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Amanda and Liz, for the opportunity to speak today. I'll begin with observations by public and private building managers in downtown Spokane and in the county on the impacts they are seeing from Tier 1 regulations and anticipate as a result of the expansion bill regulations. Multiple public institutions in Spokane County are requesting capital infusions from the state budget that altogether exceed what's available in the Commerce Department's compliance fund. Managers of large properties in downtown Spokane are finding that more recently constructed LEED certified buildings are underperforming older buildings with less modern systems. Energy use consultants estimating a total compliance cost of about half of the estimated property resale value. Other initial assessments that building out the retrofits needed to comply will require lengthy closures and the revenue losses that go with it. The office vacancy rate in downtown Spokane has climbed to 18.8%. This is the highest rate of commercial vacancy in the county, and it happens to have the highest concentration of expansion bill subject buildings in the county. We also understand that Tier 1 regulations don't adequately acknowledge the difference between Spokane County's inland mountain environment and the Puget Sound's marine environment and the higher demand on heating and cooling systems that result. We believe that outside of a significant rollback of the regulations, a significant number of building owners will find their buildings to no longer be the economic assets they once were. We oppose the CBA and the expansion bill in their entirety, but within the rulemaking process, we recommend the department broaden avenues for compliance to as wide as the policy permits. This could be reached through a number of avenues, for example, by lengthening the compliance timeline, lowering the energy use objectives to something realistic, setting rules that recognize the climatic difference between Eastern and Western Washington, or retroactively establishing the policy as applying to buildings constructed no earlier than, say, 20 years ago or 2004. We are worried that the Clean Buildings Act and expansion bill policies are so pervasive that massive amounts of the economic value of commercial buildings in downtown Spokane stands to be lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Next up, we'll call on Eric Mackinson. Eric, I invite you to unmute and testify.
Yes, so I'd just like to provide accolades for Commerce and also the state legislature in offering the incentives for the energy management plans included in Tier 2. That will go a long way to supporting buildings compliance with these Tier 2 mandates. So thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Next up, we have Amanda Beck. Amanda, I invite you to unmute and testify.
I think we'll submit comments written. Thank you. Of
course. Thanks, Amanda. Camille let me know that they are also going to submit comments online. Robert Frost, I invite you to unmute and testify. Robert, if you are unmuted and speaking, we can't hear you. So feel free to unmute and testify if you so wish. Okay, maybe we'll circle back to you at the end. Next up, we have Steve Abercrombie. Steve, I invite you to unmute and testify.
Thank you very much. My name is Steve Abercrombie. I am a faculty member at South Seattle College as part of the Sustainable Building Science Technology program, testifying on that behalf. I'd like to thank the Commerce team for its work on this rulemaking, and specifically would like to note our appreciation for the changes that were made with this rulemaking are being filed specifically to the connected building and campus implementation pathways. As part of the higher ed leaders group that's been working with the team, those changes make a significant difference in the ability to comply with campus implementations and multiple building with shared power and metering infrastructure. My specific comments on the rules today are to some of the items related to the qualified person definition under the rules. From comments submitted both by myself and others, I urge the team to take one more review specifically of some of the designations allowed for a qualified person related to, I believe, the intent and the implementation around the commissioning certifications. And furthermore, urge the Commerce team to put in place pathways for certification recognized by the Department of Energy's Better Buildings certification pathway. We have a large workforce gap needed in the implementation, and we need to train a lot of folks in order to be able to bring costs down and better support Clean Buildings Performance Standard implementation over time. And providing clear pathways to bring forth certification programs to allow that will be a big boon in our ability to make sure that our buildings we can have folks trained in order to operate our buildings more efficiently and decarbonize our building stock. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, next up we have Dermot Murphy. Dermot, I invite you to unmute and testify. I'm going to call one more time for Dermot Murphy. Dermot, if you wish to testify, you're more than welcome to unmute and testify at this time. If not, we're happy to circle back to you. All right, I'm going to move on to Karen Parham. Karen, I invite you to unmute at this time and testify if you wish. I'll give one more call for Karen Parham, Anchor Health Properties. Karen, if you wish to unmute at this time, you're more than welcome to. Couple more seconds. Okay, Karen will circle back. I'm going to move on to Joe Schmulzer. Joe, if you wish to testify, we invite you to unmute at this time. One more call for Joe Schmulzer, ATS Automation. If you wish to testify at this time, you're more than welcome to unmute. All right. I'm seeing a couple of folks who are going to be submitting comments electronically. That link is in the chat. Please feel free to submit comments there at any time. I'm going to move on to Matt Walsh. Matt, if you wish to unmute at this time, please feel free to do so.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for jumping on this. I would echo Andrew Rolls' comments from the Downtown Spokane Partnership. Just dealing with some of the big buildings downtown, buildings all over Eastern Washington, really, the cost that comes with upgrading some of these items to be able to meet the energy usage intensity targets are very much cost prohibitive, even if CPACE financing is available. These are things that, like Andrew said, and he hit the nail on the head, it really cuts down on the being such an asset to these owners, which then gets passed through to tenants based on what needs to be done, and can just be detrimental in that regard. Now, obviously opposing the CBA, but also understanding that the pathway to what is being done. Like I said, I would echo his sentiments, and that we need to start rolling back and working to see what we can do to make that more attainable. That those are my comments.
Thank you, Matt.
Yep.
I will move on to Matt Daly. Matt Daly, if you wish to unmute at this time, please feel free to do so.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
All right, great. I have a bit of experience with a couple of school districts, and I can say that the worry that the school districts had about the cost and effort to implement the tier 1 proposals, which would require capital outlay, perhaps, was overinflated. The solutions are probably easier than they are thinking. So for Seattle Public or Seattle or Spokane partnerships and whatnot, you might try talking with a contractor whose focus is energy efficiency studies as opposed to building new systems. I can't say that your larger commercial buildings will be successful, but for tier 1, that would be a first step to get a good unbiased read on how your buildings are doing. Tier 2, I had thought that the performance criteria was not part of it. Has that changed? That's, I guess, all I have to say, but thank you.
Thank you, Matt. As a reminder, if folks wish to testify, they are more than welcome to put their name and their affiliation into the chat. I will give another call to some folks that we called on that had put their names in the chat. So Dermot Murphy, Karen Parham, Joe Schmolzer, if you wish to, Schmutzler, if you wish to testify at this time, please feel free to raise your hand or unmute. We didn't get to hear you the first time. All right, I'm going to give a final call for anyone who wishes to testify. The link is in the chat to submit written comments. Give a couple more seconds for that. Great, I'm going to hand it back over to Amanda.
Thanks, Liz. So thank you all for attending today's hearing. If you wish, please remember to submit written comments by 5 p.m. today, Tuesday, November 21st, 2023. Commerce staff will consider these written comments as well as those heard today when making final edits to the proposed rules. Commerce will provide an explanatory statement for proposed edits that it chooses not to adopt. Commerce intends to file its final rules, known as CR 103, shortly after the public comment period closes. The rules will become effective 30 days after filing. If you would like to track the implementation of these rules, we ask that you subscribe to our bulletin which you can do so on our webpage, commerce.wa.gov/buildings. Thank you all for your participation throughout this rulemaking, and stay safe and healthy. This concludes our hearing.